There comes a quiet moment in the life of every soul wounded by a narcissist. A moment so subtle, so still, you might overlook it if you're not paying attention. Yet that very moment contains the power to rearrange your inner universe. It is the moment you finally stop fighting for someone who never once fought for you. The moment you accept the discard, not with rage, not with panic, but with an inward exhale, a surrender that is not defeat, but awakening. There is no dramatic confrontation, no cinematic ending, no final scream in the dark. Only an inner shift, the kind Jung described as the dissolution of a false psychic attachment. And in that instant, though you may not yet sense it, the architecture of the narcissist's control begins to fracture. Because a narcissist is prepared for rage, for tears, for collapse, for endless explanations, they can twist into new weapons, but they are never prepared for acceptance. They are never prepared for silence. They expect your panic. They count on your longing. Their power survives on your emotional participation, your pain, your confusion, your desperate search for meaning. But when you withdraw your energy, when your silence becomes a boundary, when the fear that once ruled you dissolves into clarity, something shifts in the unconscious space between you. This is what Jung called the collapse of the reflective illusion. You no longer carry the image they projected onto your psyche. You no longer hold the mirror that once glued their fractured ego together. Your calm becomes their earthquake. Your acceptance becomes their undoing. Your detachment becomes their psychological nightfall, for you simply walked away without looking back. And the narcissistic ego cannot survive the absence of an audience. From the first moment the narcissist encounters you, something begins to stir in their unconscious. Not love, not admiration, but calculation. They begin constructing an inner map of how you will respond to their every rise and fall. It is an ancient defense mechanism built long before you arrived, rooted in the unhealed fractures of their childhood psyche. In their private mythology, everyone fits a role, and unconsciously, they assign you one: the soft-hearted one, the forgiving one, the one who will bend, repair, excuse, and return. They assume your spirit will tremble when they withdraw. They assume silence will make you panic. They assume absence will make you chase. They assume blame will make you collapse inward. These assumptions are not thoughts, they are reflexes, impressions formed long before they learned language. This is why a narcissist's behavior feels eerie and repeated. They are not responding to you. They are responding to a ghost from their own past. Every gesture they offer, the sudden warmth, the poetic tenderness, the explosive passion, is merely a thread in the web they are weaving around you. It is not intimacy. It is conditioning. Jung would say they are not relating to your soul. They are relating to a complex, a cluster of unresolved wounds and illusions inside themselves. The love bombing is not love. It is a hypnotic dance meant to synchronize your nervous system with their rhythm. And the abrupt coldness that follows is the second half of the spell, the fracture that makes you cling to the memory of the warmth. To them, the discard is not an ending. It is an experiment, a psychic test designed to see whether the spell worked. It is the moment they step back, believing you will reach out in fear, believing you will return to the emotional position they carefully designed for you, the one who fears losing them more than losing herself. This belief is not arrogance alone, it is delusion, a delusion born from years of manipulating patterns that never fought back. Their unconscious whispers, "I know this one. I have seen this one before. They will return." But then something happens that their internal script has no space for. You do not collapse. You do not chase. You do not beg to understand what went wrong. Instead, you accept the discard. This acceptance, simple, quiet, unreactive, is more powerful than any confrontation could ever be. Because in that moment, the entire script they wrote for you dissolves. It does not bend. It burns. Your silence is not emptiness. It is revelation. It reveals a version of you they never imagined existed. The one who chooses her own peace over their chaos. The one who no longer needs their validation to breathe. The one who recognizes what is unworthy and walks away without hesitation. This is what Jung called ego deflection. The moment the false self loses the mirror it depends on. A narcissist does not fear losing your presence. Presence means nothing to them. They fear losing the reflection of themselves that your presence provided. They fear the collapse of the imagined superiority that only existed because you once reacted, softened, explained, forgave. Without your emotional response, they become unanchored. They cannot see themselves. They cannot define themselves. And in the narcissistic psyche, to lose the mirror is to lose existence. Your silence becomes a psychic eclipse. It blots out the image they believed was eternal. It steals the light they once borrowed from you. And so, the discard, the very act they believed would secure their power, becomes the doorway to their powerlessness. For the first time, they must face themselves without a host, without a mirror, without a script. And for a narcissistic ego, that is not discomfort. It is a form of psychological death. Silence, when held with clarity, becomes a strange kind of mirror. Not the mirror the narcissist is accustomed to, not the kind that reflects their imagined superiority back to them, but the mirror that shows the truth they have spent a lifetime avoiding. When you hold your silence, when you refuse to step back into the emotional choreography they designed for you, a subtle tremor begins inside them. The first fracture in their internal empire. What collapses is not the relationship, it is the illusion of power that sustained their identity. Narcissistic power is not real power. It is theater, a performance of dominance, a carefully rehearsed role in which they are always the hero, the victim, or the prize that everyone longs for. Jung would describe this performance as a persona, a mask created to survive a childhood where their real self was unwanted, unseen, or unsafe. The persona becomes a fortress built on sand. It looks strong from the outside, but inside, nothing solid exists. This is why the narcissist needs control, not connection. Control stabilizes the mask. Connection would expose the emptiness behind it. So every interaction with you was crafted to protect this fragile inner world. They orchestrated your reactions like a conductor waving a baton, setting the tempo of affection, interrupting it with sudden coldness, and pulling the emotional strings to make you dance in rhythm with their insecurity. But the moment you accept the discard, something unprecedented happens. You step off the stage. Their entire identity, the identity built upon I affect you, I shape you, I control how you feel, begins to disintegrate. The curtain falls. The spotlight disappears. The audience leaves. And the narcissist finds themselves alone with a self they have never actually met. The persona cracks. The inflated ego starts to deflate like a punctured balloon. The character they were playing loses meaning in an empty theater. Beneath that mask lies what Jung famously called the hollow self, a self that never fully formed because it was never allowed to be authentic. This hollow self is not evil. It is starving. Starving for validation, starving for reflection, starving for anything that keeps the inner void from swallowing them whole. Your silence removes the last source of nourishment. Now the questions begin, not spoken aloud, never confessed, but whispered in the private chambers of their unconscious. If they don't react, who am I? If they cannot be provoked, what do I matter? If my power cannot sway them, is it power at all? These are existential questions, the kind Jung said are capable of shattering the ego's illusions. Because a narcissist's sense of power never came from inner strength. It came from your emotional movement around them. Without that movement, they become weightless, unanchored, drifting inside their own psyche. For the first time, they are forced to face the one adversary they spent their entire life fleeing, their own inner void. This void is the shadow they have projected onto every partner, every friend, every lover who came too close. As long as someone else carried their darkness for them, they could pretend it did not exist. But when you walk away, when you stop absorbing their projections, the shadow returns home, and it returns hungry. Your silence becomes the catalyst for an inner collapse. A collapse where their false self can no longer shield them, where their illusions cannot soothe them, where the hollow places they have avoided begin to echo loudly. This collapse is not punishment. It is consequence. It is the moment where the narcissist must finally reckon with the truth they spent their life escaping. And the truth is simple. Without control, they have no identity. Without an audience, they have no power. Without your emotional energy, their inner kingdom falls into dust. This is the beginning of their psychic reckoning, a reckoning that continues long after you've walked away. There comes a moment in every psychic confrontation when the persona, that carefully constructed outer mask, begins to fracture. It is in this moment that the narcissist enters what Jung called the eruption of the shadow, a volcanic release of everything they have spent years suppressing beneath charm, superiority, and emotional theatrics. Your silence is the trigger, but the chaos that follows is entirely their own. At first, the narcissist does not panic openly. They begin quietly, almost invisibly, testing the edges of your attention. These are the early heat checks, small, indirect signals meant to gauge whether they still have access to your emotional world. Anonymous profile views, liking a post from months ago, watching your stories without engaging, posting vague quotes meant to provoke your curiosity, leaving comments that seem harmless but carry an invisible hook. This is not affection. This is surveillance, a silent attempt to see if the old rhythm still exists, if you will flinch, respond, soften, or react. When these faint signals return nothing, when the emotional tether they relied upon lies still and unmoving, their inner world begins to ache with a kind of existential discomfort, and so they escalate. The heat checks become more direct. Hey, are you okay? Just checking in. Been thinking about you. It's been a while. Hope you're all right. These messages are not bridges of love. They are mirrors they are trying to rebuild. They do not want your heart. They want your reaction. A narcissist needs emotional confirmation the way a drowning person needs air. Your silence is suffocating them, not because they love you, but because without your emotional response, their identity begins to dissolve. And when you still do not respond, when your silence remains steady, grounded, unshakable, something in them snaps. The ego melts into chaos. This is when the accusations begin. You've changed. You're ignoring me. Why are you acting like this? You're so cold now. You think you're better than me. These statements are not attacks on your character. They are frantic attempts to restore the old dynamic. Every accusation is really a confession. Please show me I still matter. Please show me I can still influence you. Please give me proof that I still exist in your world. When these attempts also fail, when your silence remains impenetrable, the narcissist loses the ability to maintain a consistent persona. Now the shadow fully erupts. The mask shatters. The voice shifts. The emotional tone spirals. They oscillate wildly, from tenderness to cruelty, from nostalgia to rage, from longing to indifference, all within the same afternoon. One moment, I miss you. I've been thinking about everything. The next moment, you're heartless. You never cared. Followed by, I'm sorry, let's talk. I didn't mean any of that. Most victims assume this is manipulation, a calculated attempt to regain control, but Jung would give us a deeper interpretation. These emotional swings are symptoms of an ego collapsing without a reflective surface. You were the mirror that stabilized their identity. Your attention gave shape to their ego. Your reactions confirmed their existence. Now, without your response, their inner world becomes a storm without a center. Their nervous system spirals. Their thoughts become unanchored. They experience a sense of self-loss, so painful they mistake it for longing. But they are not longing for you. They are longing for the version of themselves they could access through you. This is why they panic, why they reach out, why they attack, why they apologize, why they contradict themselves every hour. They are not trying to regain the relationship. They are trying to regain themselves. The narcissist does not fear your absence. Absence is quiet and predictable. What they fear is your independence, a version of you that no longer reacts to their emotional weather. When you remain unmoved, you force them into the one confrontation they have avoided their entire life, the confrontation with their own void. And here, in this void, their shadow rises, the unloved child, the unhealed wounds, the fragile ego they have buried beneath decades of delusion. This is why their chaos is so loud, why their panic is so desperate, why their heat checks become frantic. They are not losing you, They are losing the illusion of power. They are losing the reflection that allowed them to pretend they were whole. And in Jung's language, this is the beginning of a psychic death, not of the body, but of the false self that can no longer sustain itself without your light. When panic no longer brings you back, when silence continues like an unbroken horizon, the narcissist must search for another source of psychological oxygen. And so they turn to the new supply, not out of affection, not out of longing, but out of necessity. This new person was never a partner. They were a prop, a mirror, a symbol meant to serve two functions within the narcissist's internal mythology. First, to prove to themselves that they still won, still had power, still held the ability to replace you instantly. Second, to trigger in you the emotional wound they assume is still open. Envy, hurt, urgency, collapse. But when you remain silent, the entire architecture of that illusion shatters. The new relationship cannot achieve the one goal it was constructed for. It cannot pierce you. It cannot pull you back into their orbit. It cannot make you react. To the narcissist, this is catastrophic, because in their world, love is not nourishment. Love is leverage. A relationship exists only to manipulate an emotional response. A bond only matters if it can injure or control. But when you do not break, when you offer no reaction, not anger, not jealousy, not sorrow, the new supply fails its purpose. The narcissist begins to sense a psychic humiliation, a sinking realization that the new person cannot reproduce the emotional climate you once provided. Your presence, your empathy, your depth, all of it created a kind of stage lighting in which they felt larger, grander, more alive. The new supply cannot recreate that light. They cannot cast the old shadows in the same familiar way. And this is when the narcissist begins to unravel the new relationship, slowly at first, then violently, then desperately. They begin to project onto the new supply the very shadow they once placed onto you, but now with even greater pressure, because they have nowhere else to deposit their internal chaos. The complaints begin. She doesn't understand me like you did. He doesn't calm me the way you did. She's too emotional. He's too distant. They don't get me. These statements are not compliments to you. They are expressions of identity collapse. What they are really saying is, I cannot find myself in this new mirror. I cannot rebuild the version of myself that existed through you. I cannot restore the illusion of power I once had. This is the birthplace of triangulation. They begin to drag your name into conversations, not because they admire you, but because your image temporarily stabilizes their sense of self. Comparisons become the narcissist's last remaining crutch. You never did this. They don't understand what I need. You would have handled this better. I shouldn't have left you. But these moments of apparent remorse are not love. They are ritual attempts to resurrect a dying ego. They are not reaching for you. They are reaching for the version of themselves that only existed when you were still reflecting them. As the new supply feels the narcissist's growing dissatisfaction, the relationship begins to fracture. The narcissist pushes harder, demands more, manipulates more intensely. They blame the new supply for failing to measure up. But the truth is simpler and more haunting. No one can imitate the emotional role you once played, because that role required two things the narcissist cannot reproduce: your depth of empathy and your willingness to carry their shadow. Without you, the stage goes dark. The performance collapses. The new supply cannot revive the play because the original audience you has already walked away. The narcissist is left with a painful realization. They cannot recreate the illusion of power without the person who once unknowingly sustained it. And in the ruins of the new relationship, they confront a truth their ego cannot tolerate. It was never the new supply they needed. It was the reflection they once borrowed from you. And now, that reflection is gone forever. As every strategy fails, the heat checks, the direct messages, the guilt, the rage, the triangulation, the attempts to provoke jealousy, the narcissist enters the deepest psychological descent Jung described. The night sea journey of the ego. This is the dark night of their internal world, a descent into the unconscious where all false structures dissolve. But unlike the soul that seeks healing, the narcissist cannot endure this journey. They cannot face the shadow. They cannot integrate their wounds. They cannot look inward without collapsing. So they do what they always do when their ego begins to disintegrate. They try to return to you, but not out of love, not out of remorse, not out of growth. They return because you once held the mirror that kept their fragmented identity intact. You were the surface upon which their false self reflected. You were the emotional gravity that kept their ego from drifting into the void. You were the quiet structure they leaned on without recognizing it. Now, as their internal world collapses, they come back to retrieve the part of themselves that was never theirs to begin with, the part they projected into your empathy. But here is the revelation they never expected. You are no longer the same person they once discarded. You have walked through silence. You have passed through pain. You have seen truth. You have awakened. You have transformed. You have remembered yourself. The frequency that once allowed them to enter your world no longer exists within you. You have risen beyond their psychological reach. And so, when they return, they face a mirror that no longer reflects them, a mirror that has reclaimed itself. You are no longer their supply. You are no longer their reflection. You are no longer their stage, their audience, their emotional anchor. You are free. And for the narcissist, this is catastrophic. When the mirror disappears, the narcissist loses the ability to perceive themselves. Their ego dissolves into confusion. Their identity collapses. Their inner world becomes ungoverned. Your silence becomes their collapse. Your acceptance becomes their ending. Your detachment becomes their ego death. Not because you punished them, but because you grew beyond them. You walked into your own rebirth, leaving them behind in the ruins of their own unhealed shadow. And in that profound moment, all the power they once stole from you returns home to its rightful owner, you.